Yeah, it's going pretty good. Can't complain.
From what I like know of, your work with the mucusless diet and everything, it seems like you stay pretty busy with it, like uploading stuff on social media and
Yeah. Well, the one thing I can tell anybody that's interested is one thing I want to try to do in this next phase is do more coaching and educating educators. And there's a lot of people that's out here doing different kinds of certification and that kind of stuff. But I see the same things that are missing in terms of their education. So many of them are getting certified as detoxification specialists and this and that. But the art of the transition and the transition diet is something that I notice is often missing, and so I want to be able to contribute that and really work with a lot more people to spread this type of approach to a lot more people.
right, yeah. Because from what I've seen, I'm familiar with Dr. Morse
Mm-hmm.
and obviously um, Professor Eric work, and also the work of Dr. Sebi.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but as far as like a younger generation of uh, the mucusless diet healing system and people really teaching it and involved in it, you're kind of the only person that I've come across who is doing that. So it's really cool to have you on. Um, and just kind of backpedaling a little bit. So I know you live in Ohio now, but kind of where are you originally from? And just kind of share about what you're doing now.
So yeah, I'm originally from Cincinnati, Ohio,
Okay.
and I basically where I'm located now is Columbus, Ohio. I came up here in 2008 to finish my grad school work that I was doing. And but yeah, grew up in a suburb of Cincinnati called Springdale, and there's little complications with the way I grew up because my mom, I was kind of raised by my grandma and my aunt, but my mom was in and out of the hospital all the time, and when she wasn't in the hospital, I would stay with her in an apartment, and uh, and that was a little rough because she would I kind of had to fend for myself a little bit when I was with her,
Mm-hmm.
and it was kind of wake myself up, put myself to bed, and fix my own food. That kind of stuff is like at a real young age. But then it was
Right.
like the opposite with my grandma and my aunt, where my feet didn't touch the ground; they took care of everything, and so I had a unique experience in that with that type of dynamic. But uh, when I was 10 years old is when my grandma to me suddenly passed away. I didn't know, they didn't tell me she had been
Oh
sick.
wow.
And I really had to mother son bond with her more so than my mother. And so with her passing, that just like kind of devastated me. I was
Mm.
then 2 weeks after that, or a week after she passed away, my mom ended up in the hospital with had a heart attack and then had to go do double bypass surgery, and she never returned back to home. She just the next year and a half, 2 years, she was just either in a hospital nursing home, and I ended up having both her legs amputated from gangrene in her feet, and it was just bad. So I saw all of this. I was taking all of this in, and I just knew that this was not normal. Like, and the things that I saw in the hospitals, it's like I'm like, when there's no one talks about this stuff. No, there's no show about it. There's no ER or one of these stupid hospital shows. They're not showing what I'm seeing.
Right.
Like, this
Yeah.
stuff is real. And so I kind of was on this path of just I want to know the answers. I just put that out there. I didn't know where to look, and I didn't actively start like looking in diet like, okay, I'm going to figure this out. It came to me in a period when I was just open and searching, and looking for answers. And that's when I met Brother Air, aka Willie Smart, who introduced me to mucusless diet. And I'd known him for about a year before he even said anything about the diet. And then the famous story, or is it Shea Nora, is a little club that's not there anymore, but a little kind of a jazz restaurant, and they had all this food there in between sets. And I got me and my friend got this big plate of food, and we're sitting there eating, and right across from us is Brother Air, and he's just giving us this look. He's just looking at us like he can't hold back any longer. He's got to tell us, like, all
Right.
right, so he's got to drop the bomb on us. And so he started talking about the diet and just the world, just, and I don't even remember. All I even really remember about the conversation is just like looking down at my plate, like I'm slowly stop eating these chicken wings, and I kind of just look down at my plate and I just stop eating, and I'm just like, yeah, like, because for me it was just everything he was saying made sense. It was like,
Right.
yeah, you got a point.
Mhm.
And then after that, I just started the transition. You got the read the book, the Mucusless Diet book, and the rest is kind of history after that.
Right. So like obviously your conversation there while you were eating was kind of the mental flip of like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like I could see myself like trying that at least. So like when you started to pursue it, when did it physically like become truth for you as far as like, oh yeah, the mucusless diet healing system is like a legitimate modality for health and wellness? And like kind of how long did it take for you to really feel like, like that's kind of the modality to health and wellness?
Mm. Yeah, definitely. I would say within, I mean, definitely within a month. But even my mentality, I was just kind of determined to really, really check it out. So I wasn't really too skeptical. I just get started. I just sort of jumped on the path and wasn't even thinking like that. I was just like, boom, this is
Mhm.
what's on. But and I did what I tell other people not to do, but what a lot of people do, which is for the first 2 weeks, or was it a week? But it was a period of time before I started, really before I actually officially read the book. I just based on the conversation that I had with Brother Air, I ate nothing but fruit for a week or two.
Right,
And
which is what Dr. Morse describes you should do, which is pretty aggressive.
yeah, yeah, and it's like, yeah, what I say not to do, and that's where
Right. Yeah.
me and Dr. Morris, we have, there's a lot of things we agree on, and that there's, some methodological things and concept diet things that we
Right.
have differences of approach and opinion. But and it usually has to do with transition diet methodology,
Hmm.
pedagogy in the sense of terminology, where he adopts the raw foodist dialectic or dialogue, and where it's like I'm down with that, but to me that can be held within the mucus free or the mucusless diet healing system realm. It
Hmm.
envelops that, as well as a fruitarian dialogue, or these different dialogues are really within the context of the mucusless diet healing system. But and even in his book, the the Detox Miracle Source book, there's cooked food option in there. I mean,
Hmm.
his menus resemble quite a bit the structure of Eric's transition diet, eating a fruit during the day, or fruit in the afternoon, and a evening salad type of meal, as a standard or a default. But
Hmm.
but yeah, but that was, but in my case, it did go well. It was fine. I didn't. Some people have major healing crises. That's why it's just better to instead of doing that, it's better to transition if you can. Everybody's situation is a little different. I will say too, another difference between us and him and us is he's dealing with uh, or at least his methodology, in my opinion, is really set up for people on their deathbeds.
Mm-hmm.
Terminally ill, this is your last chance. You don't have any time to mess around. So in those cases, it is a different recommendation. It is a more
Right.
intense, like, okay, it's time to fast. It's time to, we got to clean you out quick. Let's go.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, and even then, still, we're advocates of, if they can handle it physiologically and their electrical system isn't totally, endocrine system isn't totally messed up, then the enemas, the lemon juice and distilled water enemas, which is something that is not necessarily advocated by Morris or Sabi, or a lot of other people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yes, but within a couple months, I was starting to lose weight. I was starting to kind of feel better, and it was like, and I was having some of these eliminations, but it was starting to make sense. I was starting to see, like, okay, this is really happening. And
Mm-hmm.
then somewhere in between those first couple months and then the next like 4 months is like, it really happened. It kind of came full circle. I was on it long enough to lose a significant amount of weight, go through some major eliminations. So I try to warn people. It's like, yeah, you get on this, it's going to get worse before it gets better, because you're going to start to actually loosen and then be able to eliminate and remove this stuff. And so you'll go through some periods where you might be sick, or we don't use that word like that, but you might go through that more or longer than you would otherwise normally would have. Or it might be your first time that you ever go through an elimination like that, and you don't suppress it with drugs. And that was my experience. Like, these were the first times in my life that I was sick, that I wasn't taking some kind of suppressant to
Right.
complicate and slow down and stop the elimination that my body's trying to do. And so there was a significant amount of stuff that was
Yeah.
just flowing. And
So kind of backing up just a little bit,
mm.
for listeners that might see this and don't really know what the mucusless diet is, um, what is it? If you can kind of paint it in layman's terms.
So the mucusless diet healing system is a transitional dietary and naturopathic therapy system to transition away from mucus and pus forming foods, which we believe is the foundation of human illness, and to transition toward a diet that consists mostly of mucus free foods. And mucus free foods include fruits and green leafy vegetables. And there's a number of other vegetables and things,
Mhm.
and certain prepared vegetables that become mucus free when prepared properly. Then mucus forming foods are, pus forming foods are meat and dairy, all that, the kind of the animal byproduct, all that tissue that
Right.
turns into this nasty, slimy stuff. Very concentrated form of mucus. And then the starches and the fats, even the plant-based starches and fats would fall under the mucus banner. So it's a transitional methodology. That's always what I try to hit on. And it's a system. So it's not a foodless diet. It's not do this one thing and rinse and repeat, or it's not a lot of extreme fasting, but you have to put it all together. So you are eating a certain way transitionally, then have short-term fasting, colon irrigation, sunbathing, exercise. But it's the way you put all of these things together that really makes the system effective. And so that's the short version of what it is. It's really, as it's what it says in the title, a healing system. And to really understand it and get the benefit from it, you really have to apply the full system.
Mhm. And kind of like, as a layman, like they would probably hear that and be like, "What the heck? Like, why would I even need to do that?" And so why would this be important to someone who maybe is unaware of the damage they're causing to themselves by their diet, who may think that they are eating a healthy, balanced diet? What would you say to someone, maybe entertaining a healthier lifestyle, who might think that they are eating healthy? You know.
Yeah, yeah, and this diet definitely it isn't for everybody all the time in terms of consciousness. There's tends to be a level of consciousness that you have to have, or some life experiences that you have to have had before you really uh, can conceive of and see what's going on, because there's a
Mhm.
simplicity. So some people say, well, that's real simple, but then other people look at it and be like, well, that's kind of complicated. And they're not really ready for it yet. But in
Right.
terms of, just if I'm talking to somebody that's not heard about it yet, I generally just keep it real kind of basic, and I'll connect it to existing things that's out there that they can recognize. And so, like, for a while I used the term mucus free, or the on my logo it said mucus free, the original vegan diet. A couple years ago I changed that to mucus free, the original plant-based diet, because the term plant-based, we'll get into a long boring discussion about the definitions of all that stuff, because that's all
Right.
political. But the point with that for me was an educational type of point, where for because we're living in a time when those particular terms and concepts are being more accepted and understood, then it gives you a way in to say, like, okay, well, this is the original vegan diet, but it's different than what you think. And so get people kind of mysterious. Like, if I'm talking to somebody like that on the street, doesn't know anything about the diet, and I'm wanting to persuade them and make them interested, I don't just hit them with like which with that, because usually that question wouldn't come up right yet. So I
Yeah.
wouldn't just hit them with like this kind of definition. It's kind of like permission based educating, where they have to give me permission to share more with them, and I'm only giving them a little bit so that it's mysterious, and they're the one that's like, kind of, they're hooked in, and they're asking me questions well, wait a minute. So the kind of lead for me is usually like, well, is the before and after pictures are real good, or I lost 100 pounds doing this and used to be real sick. Uh, and if you talk to somebody long enough, almost everybody has some kind of ailment.
Mhm.
And if they don't, then they know somebody in their family that did. But even young, I mean, I talk to young people that's 18 and 19 years old, and just like I was at that age, they'll complain about sinuses or problems with knee pain, and from if they were into sports or something, or it's just like there's always usually some kind of ailment. And in my case, I probably had it, so I can be like, oh yeah, I used to suffer from that, and I changed my diet and totally transformed everything. I used to
Mhm.
weigh almost 300 pounds, and checked out this diet, started practicing it, and man, I lost like 110 pounds and just felt totally better, or whatever, that kind of thing. And that kind of intrigues people. That gets them kind of like, oh, wait a minute, oh, what's going on there?
Right.
So that's really what you want to do if you're talking to somebody about it. You want to give them little bits and pieces of it that intrigue them. And if maybe you didn't have a personal story yet that is that profound, you can still do the same thing about other people's stories. If you're even sharing my story or somebody else's story that you see. I think the just yesterday I posted up on Facebook someone that I think was, kind of came through a Dr. Morris protocol, but she had I mean, she was on her deathbed, and she has a before and after picture, like one where she's in the hospital about to die, and then now she like looks totally different, and she's out of that. And so you can, tell those kind of stories, the cerebral palsy testimonials, the woman that had got off of that, and so um, there's a lot of ways to to get that. But the main thing is to get people intrigued as opposed to trying to just like educate with the definitions and the concepts like right off the bat.
Mm,
You sort of have to get them emotionally involved, invested interest, and and show them what the benefit really would be for them.
mhm.
And But yeah.
So like kind of once you reel them in and once they're, giving you permission to, educate, conceptually, how would you describe the difference between, like on a fundamental level, the difference between the mucusless diet and, other modalities that claim health and wellness?
So one of the primary differences, it really truly is one of the only systems that
Yeah.
I see. Most other modalities don't champion any kind of system. They might have a certain dietary protocol or a cleansing protocol or something like that, but the system on the level of the mucus diet is generally doesn't exist, and it's also something that can both be applied in really, like we were talking about, the really tough cases,
Hmm.
as well as a life, adaptable to a lifestyle of somebody that, if you're just living your life and you're not going through crazy eliminations, at some point you want to find the plateau point. And when you get into the mucus diet, you understand it's okay to eat mucus forming foods that are transitional, and
Hmm.
but it's how you eat them, when you eat them. There's a method to it, and that's what's different between mucus's diet as a healing system versus just the strict definition of mucus's diet would be, fruits and green leafy vegetables. But the healing system includes all these different factors so that we can have permanent transformation. One thing that I see with people that do some of these other modalities is will they might work with, doing the fruit and whatever they're doing, the herbs, and they might heal themselves of whatever it was that they were dealing with. But because they didn't transition physically or mentally, so many of them without having access or privilege of having the information in the mucus diet, they'll go all the way back to eat the way that they used to eat,
Hmm.
which totally makes no sense. It's like you
Right,
just
because what I hear people do is they'll like try the vegan diet out, and there's a
Mhm.
lot of flaws in that way of thinking, as you would
Right,
probably agree.
right,
Um, just because there is that transition process that people don't account for, and then they're like, "Oh, well, I went vegan for a year, started to feel really bad, and then went back to eating meat and loved it, like felt great, never felt better in my life." And I just feel like people kind of really missed the boat because they were inspired to go like vegan in the beginning and they have stuck it out for a good amount of time, but they seem to have arrived to the conclusion that veganism, the way they did it, was
hmm,
not without a transition or the elimination factor, um, is really not the healthiest way. And it's kind of, oh, dieting is you do what's good for you kind of thing. There is no absolute truth to dieting, as far as the healthiest foods to eat.
right.
And so I see a lot of people very mistakenly uh, arrive to that conclusion. And
Mhm.
so to me, the major difference would be like the elimination process. Like people don't understand that when you're eating better foods, you could feel worse. Like,
Right.
and it's kind of frustrating because people go based on feeling, like without seeing maybe the fuller picture of why they feel, have that dip in energy, because they've been so stimulated for so long, as you say and Eric says. So it's just really interesting to you know maybe address some of those sort of things with people that they're like, I tried going vegan for a long time, and then just ultimately didn't feel good. Um, they
Yeah,
just
yeah,
don't have
it's
access to that information, like you're saying.
yeah, yeah, and that's why, and mean, Brother Air is more hardcore than I am in when he's talking about vegans and the kind of veganism and really critiquing and criticizing that entire paradigm, or at least many folks that are uh, that get really heavy into the vegan junk foods and the stuff that ends up being can put you in just a worse condition than if you did just eat in terms of health, and if you just ate a little bit of meat with whatever. But now you're eating, Oreo cookies and going to Taco Bell veganized meals and Chipotle, what I mean? You getting all this kind of stuff, a lot of starch, uh, impossible burgers, and what I mean, there, that whole thing, no salads, not a lot of fruit. I mean, there's a lot of vegans like that,
Mhm.
and they're, of course, they're not going to be very healthy, because that's not, no one, that's like I said, not now over here, no one told them, anybody, to eat like that. And so yeah, that systematic approach and the rational approach, then, like any educational endeavor, there's levels to it. And so once you get people hooked and in the door and kind of on the path, then you want to continue over time to share deeper concepts and information, so you can start to get a little deeper into the philosophy, a little deeper into the vision of, well, what if we could eradicate disease, and what if this is the only way to do it, to transition and transform the human species by way of getting back to a more natural diet. And and then you have the educations of really of breaking down why humans are, biologically speaking, more fit for fruit, but then addressing the questions that always come that say, well, why did we've eaten this for so long? It's like, well, yeah, we've, as a species, we've eaten poorly, and adapted to it as best we can, but not totally.
Mhm.
And we're paying the consequences. Walk into any hospital, if they even let you in now, because it's, this whole
Right.
stuff going on with the pandemic, you can't just walk into the hospital. But if you, just really take some time to look at that, and these hospitals and stuff, they're just huge, and a lot of people just don't think about it until they're forced to go there
Mhm.
for some reason. But it's like these huge monuments to sickness. So much money, so much resources is going into these places, and with all of that money and resource that goes into these places that's supposed to be sanctuaries of healing, they're serving people absolute filth that you
Mhm.
you can't heal eating this stuff. So it's so just so backward.
Right.
But yeah, yeah, as far as the vegans go, though, I work a lot with raw foodists and fruitarians, or aspiring raw foodists and fruitarians, who really, really, really wanted that. They really wanted to be 100% raw. They, because there's that, which, Dr. Morris is, he's a little different from, like, there's the 80-10-10, and there's a few different kind of raw gurus that also don't really teach transition or talk about transition, and but they're persuasive and they get people on board. But then they start changing what they talk about, that
Mhm.
ends up kind of looking like a transition, but it's still, you might as well have just dealt with the mucus diet, because they went from 100%, 100% raw, and eat all these, all this fruit and get your calories, to eat raw until 4 o'clock. He's made that up. Eat raw till 4. We're gonna eat raw, and then at 4 o'clock, go eat cooked food. But of course, then, but eat cooked rice. Like, why would that be the cooked food that you would want to eat? Why not just eat some cooked collard greens or something, with a salad? I don't, but that's what happens. It's because there's not a system in place. Then, you just gotta make stuff up.
Yeah. And then you mentioned it earlier. There kind of has to be a presence of mind or an awareness or consciousness to even entertain the idea before, because no one can make someone understand something. You just have to be they have to help them, just like discover it for themselves kind of thing. Um, so like I hear that word being thrown around a lot in terms of like dieting and consciousness and like conscious eating. So like in terms of the mucusless diet, how would you say that it pairs or it coincides and works with like consciousness and um, first off, like define it, consciousness and the relationship between the diet and overall like state of mind.
So for me, this consciousness is the awareness of body, mind, and spirit. So in that holistic awareness, and this is just me kind of just riffing off the top of my head, but just
Mm,
that's how I feel about it. Just if you're conscious, then there is it's just a profound awareness that you otherwise, if you're not conscious, then you're not aware. You
mhm,
don't really understand any, on any level. You're not going to understand the physical reality, space and time, your mental sphere. You're not connected, you're not plugged in to that frequency or that vibration. And that's another way I like to think about it. When you start to practice a mucus diet and you clean yourself out, and there's old philosophies, I think, that go back into different African philosophies and ancient Egypt and stuff, but where they talk about your hair, and Eric, so he talks about it in a
mhm,
little different way. But the talking about the hair basically being antennas, and the hair, and just that they're all little antennas that can perceive and take in this cosmic energy.
right,
And this gets philosophical, uh, but that kind of discussion where you can say, well, wouldn't it make sense that as you clear yourself out physically, you're also going to be clearing yourself out spiritually? Your mental is going to come with it, and if it
mm,
doesn't, it should. You got to address that. And as you do that, it elevates everything. And
right,
so it puts you in a position to where you can really have true knowledge. As the old philosophy says, know thyself.
right,
That this to me is the best path for knowing thyself, because you can still do the different meditation traditions. All that kind of stuff is good, and when you find one that works for you, I'm an advocate of doing whatever you're inspired to do. And so if you're into Kriya yoga or something, there's so many disciplines out there, Wim Hof or whatever.
mhm,
If you find ways to
yeah,
have it plug in to the mucusless diet, but the mucusless diet has to be that foundation.
right,
And but once it is, then there's just really what would seem to be miraculous kind of experiences that you can have of just profound understanding and opening up your heart. I mean, that's another thing, uh, is dealing with people that are not empathetic is another kind of ethical vegan thing, that educational pedagogical model that they use is really trying to shock people and appeal to people's ethics, their heart. And that'll work for a percentage of people, especially empaths and folks that are pretty empathetic. But for a lot of people, that's not, they're too constipated and obstructed. They're not going to make that connection. You can't show them a slaughterhouse video yet and
right,
have them feel anything. They're just, and I was like that, where you wasn't going to deter me from eating meat. But before I started practicing the diet, by just showing me a bunch of pain and suffering animals, like, I was that disconnected. But after I'd practiced for a while and I started to clean myself out, that consciousness, as well as just that ability to experience empathy and feel my surroundings, feel the plants and the trees, just walking through the woods, the animals scurrying around, to actually feel them, then watch something like the slaughterhouse videos, and it's just like, I'm never eating meat. It's like that. That's how you do
Right.
it. But yeah, but that consciousness, raising that awareness and understanding, and being open to do so. That's part of where you have to uh, be humble. It's a humbling experience to where you come, because that's some other people who have problems with, especially folks that have tried to study a lot of orthodox nutrition concepts, and they feel like they already have it together, like they all got, like, well, they're coming at it from this real, these numbers and figures, and it's like, well, how do your calories, and this is a well balanced protein
Mhm.
based thing, like they come like that, and it's like, to be able to go down this and get the true benefits, you have to have definitely a level of humbleness to say, okay, I'm gonna start over again. Whatever
Mhm.
I thought I knew, I'm starting over. We're gonna scrap that for a minute and just check this out. And that's really hard for some folks to do.
Right. Yeah, I think in a lot of ways, I was unaware that I was unaware. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Um,
Right.
I I think a lot of people who try this diet, think they have a clear understanding of themselves and how they function in relationships and kind of in the world and how
Hmm.
they perceive it. Um, so, kind of as you went down this journey, and even still today, do you have like trouble? Um, because there's so much stimulation in the world, not just food,
Mm.
but like TV and social media and um, being around people that are so stimulated for so like always, um, just kind of living, that like squirrel like attention span. Uh,
Right.
like how do you kind of adjust through through what you were like transitioning from like the meat and like pus forming foods, because it can kind of be extremely overwhelming
Yeah.
depending on the environment you're in. So do
Yeah.
you have any advice for anyone like moving down that path to kind of ease the process?
Yeah. So this is a good thing for people to read. My book Spira Speaks. There's a whole section where I'm talking with Samantha Claire, and I get into some of these things because she's going through exactly that. So it's like a
Mhm.
case study of somebody getting into the diet. She's living at home with her parents, like she had went to college, went back home, and the kind of pitfalls of that, and dealing with, you're living real close to folks that eat totally different, and you're trying to get into this thing. And so I would definitely recommend checking that out. But just as a general kind of thing, that's where each person's situation is going to have to be different, and you have to first really read the Mucus Diet Healing System book, really absorb that information, and then start to decide how you're going to design your life. You take control.
Mm,
And a lot of people, that becomes uh, a little bit scary for some people, because now it's like, do you really want freedom? Do you really want to be free? Because with freedom comes levels of responsibility that most people don't, who think they're free but really aren't,
mhm,
don't experience. And you start to say, okay, well, if you're ready to be free, then you're going to have to take this stuff on. You're going to have to deal with these things. Now, in my case, the way I designed it was, as a aspiring musical artist, my life revolved around pursuing those ends. So it was about
mhm,
trying to, I wasn't, especially in those early days of Mucus's Diet, like I wasn't out doing a lot of socializing and definitely wasn't trying to fit into nothing. I was focused on becoming the best musician I could be, and really practicing this diet to the highest level. And but through that, I met more people that practice the diet for, Brother Air, and then started meeting other people where I was at. And every once in a while, I would meet somebody, introduce them to the diet, and they got into it, and then we would be friends. And so I was starting to kind of build a little community around myself. Well, it was already kind of existing. His Brother Air was doing that work, but then I came along and contributed to it. So on one thing, I always tell people, if you're feeling lonely or that kind of stuff, you have to take the initiative. And this is part of the work, and this is some of the work people want to like to do. But in this time, in 10 years, this will be different, because it's going to be a lot more prevalent. There's going to be, mucus free meetups and support groups and that kind of stuff, localized things where you can go and hang out. And so we're working on that kind of stuff and building that, because we understand how important it is to have that social hookup. But right now, you have to be a leader if you want to do that. And so you have to be the one to say, okay, I want to socialize, I want to plug in with some people, bring people into your world. You don't always have to go into someone else's thing. Host your own juice parties, host your own mucus free potlucks or lucks or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of thing is one approach. In my case, like I said, I'm more of a solitude type of person, or loner, as they might say. And so I'm because partly of the way I grew up and stuff, but I'm real comfortable being by myself. And so I like, if there's people I connect with, I like being around those people, but I don't have to constantly always be around folks. Where some people, if they grow up living with a lot of other people or siblings or something, um, it's hard for them to function without the stimulation of being around other people.
Right.
And so, but I'm an advocate for, at some point, that solitude is really going to help you in terms of your insight, get the clarity of thought, those other little influences. You kind of get that out of there for a period of time. And once you get to a certain level, then those influences don't do anything. So you can go back and be in some of those environments.
Right.
Like we used to play music at me and Brother Air, we were street musicians. We like to play music on the street, and we'll go up to Chicago, like the Taste of Chicago, playing music at the Taste of Chicago. And so it's like, you want to talk about education. So I went up there, he's fasting, I'm fasting, and we're in one of the most gluttonous festivals in the country, just pure gluttony. And we're in the middle of it playing music while fasting, and so it's like that, that kind of thing. And, and the kind of education you get from doing something like that, just observing, like, it's like, wow, I haven't eaten anything in days, and I'm looking around, and these people is like, kind of folks that are overweight and obese, and like, you can tell a lot of people are sick and on walkers and canes, and just, but but they're just stuffing their face with all this mess.
Right.
And it puts into perspective why we do the work we're doing, but also why it's challenging, because
Mm-hmm.
we've done a job, we've done a number of on ourselves in terms of uh, going down this rabbit hole, this pus and mucus rabbit hole. And so it's gonna take some effort to get out of it.
Right. Yeah. Um, I think you mentioned a little bit about it, but I kind of come from a Christian background, and I can't help but notice a lot of parallels between, the mucusless diet and some of the lessons you observe, through kind of getting that Western consumerism mindset out of your practice,
Mm-hmm.
kind of because in the United States, fasting, the idea of fasting it's catching on a little bit, but the idea of withdrawing, not consuming, is not popular amongst the masses. It's
Right. Yeah.
to not consume in a consumer society is pretty backwards. Um, so like fasting is a very spiritual thing that I didn't do a lot of until, or when I tried, I couldn't really do it because I would just get angry,
Mhm.
um, because I was eating such a poor diet that, once I started to eliminate, I just get mad.
Right. Right.
Because and I just thought that that kind of was how it was. I just can't go long without eating. But started to realize through the diet that it's just not the reality. It's because of my current present physiological state that causes that, you know, bad attitude or negativity, and like hanger to come in.
Right. Right.
So it was very satisfying to come across something that allowed me to not be tied to dieting, because I would literally schedule my day by meals and couldn't go very long without needing to go eat. Even though I wasn't overweight or obese or out of or not healthy by Western standards, I knew that something was wrong in needing food to function.
Mm.
Um, and not being able to function very long without it.
Mm.
And I think that was one of the major attraction points initially for me. And being able to not eat, having the freedom to say, yeah, no, I'm good. Like I can, I can go to bed, because I used to not be able to go to bed without, a big meal.
Mm.
And that, obviously is, you kind of need to have not eaten for 4 to 5 hours before
Yeah,
sleep.
yeah, it's good to not have a big old
Right,
pound, a bunch of stuff in your stomach when you're trying to sleep. Yeah.
right, because your body's trying to take a break, but you just stuffed your face full of food,
Right.
especially not healthy food.
Right.
Um, so, so kind of my next question would be like, what, um, what about the diet, or kind of, is there any like one specific truth or any experience that you've had, that the mucusless healing system has kind of taught you about life? Um, maybe you just one experience, or maybe just a profound truth that you didn't really realize until you went on this journey.
So for me, the real profound answer that I've got, that which I had been searching for since I was really young, was for the cause of human suffering. And of course, there's many traditions, like religious traditions and philosophical traditions, that have various answers to that. I had studied and researched them. Those answers did not resonate with me. They didn't have a solution. They didn't really seem to be the real deal. But it wasn't until I read the Mucusless Diet Healing System that I started to really elaborate a bit, meditate a bit on the uh, the implications of the information that's in the books. But as I started to do that, that's when I started really realizing that the eating of pus and mucus forming foods over generations and generations, in other words, humans getting away from their natural diet, their species specific diet, is the foundation of chaos in the world, is the root of all evil. Some people would take issue with me saying, putting it in those terms. That's what I found, was that is the root. And so, and there's a lot of different traditions where they, whether you view it as as something that really happened, or a metaphor, where diet is the fall of humanity. It
Right.
revolves around some kind of unnatural or impure dietary decision. And so that's really what I got, because as growing up, I was obsessed with studying the the pain and suffering of humanity, from slavery and the Holocaust, world, all the wars, just war that goes back. I studied a lot of this stuff on my own as a child, wanting to understand it and figure out, like, why does this happen? And simply what I found with the mucusless diet is if you take pus and mucus out of the equation, mind you, for a long enough period of time with a person, you get to a point where it becomes an impossibility to have that kind of human reality. All of the things that cause people to behave like that and to have those value systems, the desires, the psychopathic nature, that is removed, that's eliminated, and you have a new person. And when you have put a bunch of new persons together to make a group of people, now you have a nation of people that do not operate and think and behave in the manner that has brought on all of this chaos in the world.
Mhm.
So for me, that was that most profound. It was like, this is the answer I've been looking for in terms of understanding why there's so much suffering, understanding what we've done to ourselves. The great fall of humanity, and now we're trying to pick the pieces up, off the floor and figure this thing out. And that answered the questions for me, so I'm eternally thankful for that, because once that clicked in, that's been solid for years, as far
Mhm.
as that, and understand. So every time I see something, turn on the news, turn on whatever, it's just like, I know that pus and mucus is behind that. That's it's behind all of that, all that suffering.
Yeah, that's really good. And then kind of stepping away from dieting, not that um, not that it's vitally important and what you eat and your kind of lifestyle. Um, but what would you kind of are there any practices that you pull alongside that you personally have adopted? Like you say, you play music, and it's kind of was your outlet of expressing yourself. Um, but was there anything else that you would kind of pull alongside the discipline of the mucusless healing system and along with music that kind of helped you? Like you mentioned Wim Hof, like that's a kind of meditative breath work
Mhm.
practice. Was there anything like that that you've adopted in your time of like transitioning or even today?
Yeah. A big one for me was the use of something called the Sedona method. I have a how to, not a how to video, but a review video on my channel on that. But that was, I had that before I had the diet, and I truly believe that helped me find the diet and be ready for it when it came. And so Sedona method essentially is an emotional release practice or emotional release system. And sometimes I call it Sedona yoga, or
Mm,
meditation, because it's really can be a meditation kind of process, but it's basically a technique that is, it takes advantage of the way that our neuroplasticity works in our brain. They don't even explain it like this, but I'm explaining it like this. But it takes advantage of the neuroplasticity of the brain, so that when you bring up certain emotional triggers, you you can actually change it. You can rewire your brain,
mhm,
and this can be very helpful when you're trying to deal with various addictions or depressions, or you have other things. We're generally not taught how to do that in our society. If you watch children or like little babies before they're really programmed and oriented to society, they can go through a bunch of different emotions in a short period of time. They don't hold on to them, and they don't try to suppress them. So they could be like really happy, and all of a sudden they see something and they get sad, then they see something else and they're in wonderment, and then they go back to being happy. They can do that in a minute. They can go through all these
mhm,
different emotions, and they just cycle through it because they're not holding it back. It just kind of going through the waves of that type of the emotional life. But as adults, we pretty much suppress everything, a lot of stuff, and then we're given the permission to, in a short period of time, and on a Friday night, we can go take some drugs and get some alcohol and go to the club and go get crazy and scream and woo, yeah, go to the sports thing and yell and and like get some of that out, go to the concert and and that kind of thing. But you're not really eliminating the real
Mhm.
cause of that, but especially because you brought the drugs into it, a lot of people. And so for me, I know I kind of got out there on that, but the Sedona method, it's a natural technique to eliminate that you can use throughout the day, or you can use it, when or do little periods of it, but you basically bring up either different things that you're working on or that you want, or anxieties or things you're scared of, or whatever emotion, or even things that you feel good about. You also release on the good emotions, which is a technique inside it. But uh but that was huge for me, that the emotional release, and doing a lot of introspective, going through and addressing these things that were stressors and old trauma, all that kind of stuff. And so the other things that are more complicated, there's a number of different traditions or modalities that are kind of in this, like this mental health release space. So neurolinguistic programming, I spent some time studying that. But
Mhm.
I always just recommend, if you're interested in this kind of thing, the average person would probably be best to check out Sedona method, because you don't have to believe in anything. There's no, like, there's no dogma, there's no nothing. It's just a tool. And if you apply the tool, you don't have to believe it's gonna work to get a benefit from it. Because if you do it,
You'll see
then
pretty quick.
yeah, you'll see what I'm talking about. But psychoanalytic therapies and that type of it they all do the similar things in terms of kind of reprogramming the brain and bringing out the traumas, and addressing things. And you find what fits for you. But for me, that the Sedona method was really helpful. At that time too, I was also into Kriya yoga, and that was part of what helped me understand that I needed to get into the mucusless diet healing system, because I couldn't do the exercises that they wanted me to do, because it's like, okay, breathe in through your nose for this and hold it and breathe out. It's like, but my nose is totally stopped up every day with mucus. And and so once I read the mucusless diet, I was like, oh, wait a minute, it would make sense for me to do this to clean myself out, so that I don't have this nose problem, so that if I do want to do this breath work, I can actually do it properly,
Mhm.
the way they recommend doing it. And so that was in the early days, that was an important part. But then over the years, I've kind of developed my own breath work and meditation, just that's sort of piecemeal from all these different
Mhm.
things, from over the years of studying stuff. But uh, but yeah, but those were important in the early days. And I'm an advocate for viewing, I call them ancillary therapies. And so there's a number of different things that could be brought into the mucusless diet lifestyle, but you got to do it the right way. You really have to, if you get the mucusless diet as the foundation, and then depending on what's happening, bring in therapeutic massage, or there's certain kind of chiropractics that I think can be beneficial. I've not talked a real detail, like about which ones it is, which eventually I'll do. But chiropractics, or the aromatherapy, for depending on what's going on, we have a lot of great tools. But what I find happens is people get obsessed with like one tool,
Mhm.
then they get into herbology and they throw themselves into that, and then that's it. It's like there's no holistic kind of concept that uh, of a holistic therapy, where it's like, okay, well, yeah, let's understand how we might be able to use the herbs, but like I said, there's aromatherapy is something. You need the essential oils. What about that? There's times when that can be really beneficial.
Hmm.
The hot cold compresses. Uh, Physical therapy. I mean, of it within the medical sphere, I find that the tradition that's developed in what they call physical therapy to actually be very beneficial, especially in some people's circumstances. So that's another modality that in some cases I recommend. It's like, do those exercises, because those exercises, they're not designed to like build up this great muscle and it's designed to actually strengthen core muscles and tendons and things that you normally wouldn't ever work unless you know those exercises. You're not going to do that. And so but that's why I get real excited about the mucusless diet, because it's open for that. If you know how to bring these other things in there, it's like there's always a best practice and solution for like whatever's going on. You can kind of bring these other elements in. And juice therapy kind of goes without saying, because that's in the mucusless diet. But yeah, but there's a lot of possibilities. But the main thing is really focus on the transition diet, mucusless diet methodology, and then over time you'll be able to incorporate these other these
Right. And
things
and
as you need them.
one of the other ones I came across was originally kind of the first, before I, discovered or started any sort of mucusless system, was like with the Wim Hof method, or that kind of deep breathing practice, and the deep breathing breath work,
Yeah.
along with the cold therapy and even hot therapy.
Mhm.
Um, so it's been really interesting. And then kind of the people will phrase it like the Kundalini breath work, or the Kachari Mudra, like kind of clearing that sinus nasal pathway to kind of activate the pineal gland. Um, if I'm speaking on it right, I think it's just all just really interesting, and you can kind of secrete nutrients, you know, without eating, right? Which is kind of, I connected that biblically. I think it may even apply to when Christ says, man shall not live on bread alone, but the word of God. Well, depending on how, that might have an application there. So it's all very interesting how,
Well, but that's how you start seeing things so different.
yeah,
That filter allows you to do that, like have original takes on things. And that's where I can tell if somebody's really doing this work or not, is they'll start to sound unique in terms of their analysis. I can follow what they're talking about and be like, okay, you're thinking through this yourself, as opposed to just regurgitating what somebody else said or what somebody else wrote. And to me, that's an important part of the practice of the system, is that. And you were talking about consciousness earlier. That's part of that consciousness, that awareness, and becoming an original. Really thinking for yourself and thinking through some of these kinds of things, as opposed to just like towing the party line and just like, well, Spira said this, so I'm gonna say it. It's like, nah, just
right, yeah,
think through these things. I try to provide the tools to where, yeah, you think through it yourself and you'll come to your own realizations, because that's really a lot of these different traditions. And there's a friend of mine that had said this, and this was kind of profound. But when he was saying most religions, especially religions that the masses flock to, revolve around somebody else's path to realization. And you start thinking about it, I was like, yeah, that's true. It's like a lot of these on whatever the people end up believing about. It's like there's usually there's a core figure that that goes through on this path of realization that they're on, and
mm,
then you have followers that try to, it's like they try to almost skip over their own path of realization by way of just plugging into
good
what
thing.
this other person did. And and so I'm just an advocate of like, okay, well, get on your path and realize, go through these realizations yourself. It's not good enough to just be in close proximity to somebody else that had the realization. I want you to have the realization. And which is so that, and that's even a revolution compared to a lot of these traditions. That's a revolutionary kind of approach anyway, because there is this tendency to just to want to have it the other way around. But yeah.
Yeah, I that idea or that line of thought of experiencing it yourself or having those realizations and kind of epiphanies um, would be very backwards to maybe like the Bible Belt kind of Christian way of thought, just in the sense that um, kind of a main thought is that your experience, unless very tested and backed by like modern theologians,
Mm-hmm.
is wrong. And that's like the sin of man. Like experience doesn't contradict truth, like universal truth. Um, and then they would kind of describe like anything contrary to that perspective as the state of mankind being in sin. And I've kind of had a difficult time thinking through like some of those perspectives because you grow up in that line of thinking, and at first like that way of thought was like a revelation. Like you were like, okay, there's a way to life, that's a way to man that seems right. In the end, it leads to death. Um, and like there's so much truth in the mainstream. I think there's enough truth there drawing them to it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it's digging deeper to, okay, what does it really mean to, like when Christ says, I'm the way, the truth, the life, no one comes to the Father except through me. Like, what does that really mean? Um, in terms of, for me, like
Mm-hmm.
so it's different. It's trying to
Yeah, yeah, and
uh,
it's
unthink and rethink and unlearn and relearn and kind of
yeah,
constantly reference, because you kind of want to do it diligently and not just on a whim, so to speak.
yeah.
um,
And that really, I mean, and that goes for almost anybody coming from whatever, because there's, yeah, folks coming from a where religion is a really huge part of their background, and in your case, like you're talking about. But then you got people that are coming from the science, like a real firm scientific, where that's their religion, is the scientific breakdown and the nutrition breakdown. And it's like the mucusless diet is forcing you to confront all of those preconceived notions from all of those backgrounds. And when we talk about, because a lot of people use the concept of transforming yourself and the personal transformation, that's
yeah.
like a term and concept. But we're serious about that, that really, like, are you ready to truly transform who you are, and to go through all of that, to have challenged all of your preconceived notions. And some people aren't, but for the people that are, then yeah, that the path it's something else. It's definitely is going to take you to levels that's just like you that you didn't see coming. And but yeah, with the Christian, I usually, in those discussions, I'll tend to stay on Genesis 129, like, and some of them will be like, well, all you're talking about is the Old Testament. I was like, yeah, you missed it. you totally missed the point,
Right.
because it's telling you a story of chaos. It's telling you a story of before and after chaos. So before chaos, before improper eating, there was peace and tranquility amongst in Eden, the natural human existence. Uh, then then the laws were broken. The laws of eating were broken, and all hell broke loose, for lack of a better concept. And and that whole Genesis is telling you the story of that chaos of what happens when you break the rules. And so, but then the way that it's generally interpreted in most, Christian theologians is that, we get Noah gets off the ark and God says, well, eat whatever you want. But that's not how I interpret it. I said people were already eating what they wanted. Noah was drunk getting off the ark. And
Mm,
it's basically informing you of the natural laws that already exist. If you continue to eat like this, if you continue to live like this, you have free will to do what you want, but you're not going to live longer than 120 years old. And you can see people progressively getting to the point where, living for thousands of years, then living for 500 years. Now you're not going to live more than 120 years. It's informing you of laws that were already there. Just then, this is just me, is the way I interpret it from a mucus free type of filter. um which I know is like put all kinds of pushbacks, like, no, that's not what it means, and they weren't really living that long, and that's just, it's like, all right, I got you, but I'm just saying, you didn't think about it like I just said it, that you didn't think
right.
about it like that, where it can be looked at as very clear that it was immortality, living in bliss, and then that wanting to, was it the uh the truth of, the knowledge of good and evil,
Right.
was that, the eating of wrongly, which of course it wasn't mucus probably yet, because that physiologically humans degenerated over a long period of time to the point where we're eating like we eat now.
Mm,
But some unripened fruit, some starchy substance, something that could have been that initial transition that would lead to a the eating of dead animal flesh eventually, and just going further and further down the rung to the point, drinking rotten. I mean, what human wants to drink rotten juice? But we have an billion-dollar industry of rotten juice.
hmm
What? It's ridiculous, but it's uh from a practical, it's like, yeah, you can get into like, well, there's periods in history where the water was polluted and was killing people and dysentery and this and that. So humans developed this tradition of creating alcoholic beverages that could be where you could have something to drink that was like sterile and wouldn't kill you. But it's like, yeah, but at the same time, it's creating a species of just of drunk people in a drunken stupor, and being in there. And then to count, as Eric points out, to counteract all that alcohol, now you're bringing even more meat into your diet. So now it's just, you're creating this downward spiral that results in where we're at today. I mean, it's exactly where that comes from, is that of from thousands of years ago, where you combine all, the alcohol and the dead animal eating and those traditions, and then 2,000 years later, you end up with McDonald's and Burger King on the street, and a liquor store on every street.
Yeah.
It's
That
kind of what
like
happened.
essential business.
Right. Yes, exactly. Essential business. Yeah. Dairy Queen, it's essential. Come get your hot fudge sundae. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, just I feel like there's plenty we could kind of keep on going about, but maybe just for time's sake, for someone listening or who might view this, how can someone connect to your material, or if they want to learn more, kind of which direction would you point them?
So definitely visit my website, mucusfreelife.com. Sign up for my newsletter. And when you do, you can get several free gifts. We have a PDF download of some recipes to help you eliminate mucus. and as well as an introduction to mucus-free menu planning. You can download all of that just for free when you sign up for the newsletter, and you'll get informed. If you really want to really start getting serious about checking out this information, we publish 7 books, the most important of which is the annotated, revised, and edited Mucusless Diet Healing System. You can buy that on mucusfreelife.com. You can also get that from Amazon. If you want the get all 7 books for one great price, then you can find that on mucusfreelife.com as well. We have our book bundle. I have an e-course, that the 2-month-long e-course that takes you from start to finish through the entire Mucusless Diet Healing System. We have some food prep videos in there. It's basically a college course on the Mucusless Diet Healing System, where Mucusless Diet is the textbook. But yeah, then I got my YouTube channel, and we're releasing new content all the time. Instagram, Prof.Spira on Instagram, and I'm doing I'm a lot more active on there than I used to be. So then you can find me on Facebook. I'm getting so tired of Facebook, but I'm still on there, doing stuff, and we have the support group on there. But yeah, but you plug in, definitely plug in. There's plenty of free information, all kinds of blog posts and videos, and stuff that you can check out to start to immerse yourself into this consciousness, this frame of reference. We have a different take on things that you haven't heard before on any other channel, in terms of, or just any other frequency, in terms of the way that we think about diet. So I definitely invite you to join us, plug in, and start this path of transformation.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate having you on and taking the time to meet with me. And I think we've been on an hour and a half now. So I just really appreciate that, and everything that you're doing with your work, and um, in a lot of ways fighting the good fight. And it's encouraging, and I would love to do it again, or if not in person.
Yeah,
Um,
man. All right, yeah, maybe you can make it out to one of the Arid Day celebration, which we're
right.
still putting together, figuring out how we're gonna do it. But yeah, that's definitely over the next couple years. We're trying to do more things, just bringing people together in the community, and meetups, and that kind of stuff, because that's the phase we're in, to really create that support system. And so yeah, a lot of great things on the horizon.
Nice. Well, it's super encouraging. But that's kind of all I got for today. So I really appreciate it, and just take care.
All right, thanks for having me on.
Yeah,
All right, peace,
we'll see
love.
you.